I am going to be much more serious, I'm afraid. But that is the topic that I am going to talk about. I'm going to talk about women's contribution in public life. I have been engaged in or around the Arab world for several decades. And the country, as was mentioned, that I have spent most years outside my native country, Sweden, is Iraq, followed by Egypt, where I'm presently the director of the Swedish Institute on the Coronation Machine, as you may know it. And I came in 2010 after spending 2 years in a container in the Green Zone in Baghdad. This is, of course, a comfortable life in Alexandria, much more comfortable than it was in Baghdad those days. The Institute is an integral part of the Swedish Foreign Service. And its mandate is to enhance the understanding between the peoples of Europe and the peoples of North Africa and the Middle East. And that we focus mainly on issues related to democracy and human rights. It is my pleasure tonight to address this audience of young people mainly, and it is, of course, a very important moment in the history of this country during the evolution of the democracy in Egypt, but also in other countries of the region. The present situation with the demonstrations in many places proves that democracy cannot be gained overnight. It is a long process. It takes several years. It's a process. It's not a thing that you get immediately. It requires the people, of course, to have patience. It is very important. While at the same time steps have to be taken, reforms have to be created, in which the voice of the citizens have to be heard as well. Important. The uprisings that swept through the Arab world are historic, as are the opportunities that will present themselves as the era of dictatorships draw to an end. That is what everyone is hoping for. However, nothing is yet certain, since the outcome is not yet clear. The uprisings, many people say, are not yet revolutions. Nothing can be taken for granted. Democratic processes are only beginning to emerge. Security is still shaky, and so on. More time is needed before the past can be overcome and we go towards a brighter, open, pluralistic, and democratic society. The uprisings have created new perspectives. The dichotomy or the barrier between the Muslim countries and the West will probably change character. And especially the young generations will keep connected in much higher degree than was the case before. The young people in the West and the young people in the Middle East, North Africa will keep connected, which was not the case before in the same way. The dynamics of the new situation is very interesting. And whether the MENA region will be able to develop its own socio-political model remains to be seen. Issues related to economy, culture, and religion, the rights and duties of the citizens, the position of women in the societies, and many other issues have to be decided upon by the decision makers in all these countries. Now, the democratization and emancipation of the Middle East, North Africa societies will, in my view, mostly depend on the engagement of civil society. Yes, laws are necessary, but the role of civil society is perhaps even more important. Getting rid of dictators is not enough. A broad-based social and political movement must come to the fore. The active participation of the citizens, men and women, of non-governmental organizations, of the media, of intellectuals, and so on, is a precondition for ensuring that the dynamic of democratization preserves its independence. Demonstrations, yes, they are important as an outlet for people's discontent, but they should be accompanied by constructive participation in the public debate. Demands must be raised for political commitment to reform women's place, for example, in public life, of their rights and their autonomy. Education, empowerment, and involvement of women in public life are important factors for the development of any society. The former UN Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan, once said, "There is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women." If the question of women's rights is only used for political ends or formal reforms that change only the legal structure, then the woman's situation in public life will hardly improve in a very, very long time. That would be an artificial improvement which does not go deeply enough into the minds of the citizens. What must be changed are mindsets, behaviors, perceptions. We can argue that women must participate in public life, laws must be changed, etc. But if the mindset is not changed, laws might either not be created or maybe not adhered to. We should not forget that the women we have seen demonstrating in the streets, Cairo, Alexandria, elsewhere in the Arab world, were relatively speaking a minority, a small group of relatively educated young women belonging to the elite. In the societies of the MENA region, the majority of women, however, are not themselves, in many occasions, convinced. They are probably still skeptical about the change of women's position in society. And they do not realize that the societies need the women in the public life in order to develop. They need to be convinced about that. And it is therefore important to approach these women in time to present new ideas, clarifications, proposals, share experiences, and so on, which can form a basis for the debate and on how to create new Arab, majority Muslim countries which are in conformity with democratic ideas. At the same time, they are palatable and acceptable to the people. The demonstrators in the streets of the Arab cities kept chanting, "We want justice and freedom and dignity," as you remember. This is, of course, what the Arabs have expressed after decades or even more of foreign domination and domestic oppression. I would like to touch upon one of those concepts which were part of the slogan during the uprisings, the concept of dignity. Of course, dignity is something that concerns every citizen, old and young, rich and poor, men and women. Here I would like to touch upon the relationship between women and dignity. Women, dignity, and public life. There can be no ambiguity about the ethical orientation that Islam provides. The Quran, in Surah 17, in verse 70, says, in English, "We have conferred dignity on human beings." And in Arabic, وَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ في البر والبحر ورزقناهم من الطيبات وفضلناهم على كثير ممن خلقنا تفضيلا. Now, this is a principle that applies to all humans, women and men, rich and poor, black and white, Muslim and non-Muslim. It is the primary and fundamental principle of social justice that in practice rests on two prerequisites: equal rights and equal opportunities. The first steps along this path to the goal are education, social equality between men and women, that is equal rights, equal possibilities, equal pay for equal skills, and so on. Women's, as well as men's, dignity is an important trait in the Arab world. Traditionalists consider that the female sphere of life is in the homes, and women's main responsibilities are to keep family together and to see to the well-being of its members. She should not be tarnished by appearing in public life where men are struggling with each other on issues, for example, on policy, politics, economy. However, times have changed, and it is now, at least in most cities, but not so in the countryside, taken for granted that boys and girls have the right to education, the same education, from primary school up to university. The graduates who are young women and men enter their adult life with the same prerequisites to participate in and influence the society they are living in and into the social, political dialogue. The need for women to work outside the family institution should be emphasized. Society as a whole, thus also the men, will gain from it. The participation of men and women in decision-making and an equitable representation in leadership positions in both formal and informal sectors are necessary. But, honestly, I put the question, is part of women's dignity not to participate in the debates about the future of their children? The education system, the healthcare system, the social justice are some examples of issues which are in real need of change and development. Dignity, in my view, is not to stay at home while others, the men, are deciding what is right and wrong for all citizens without consulting the women. Dignity is not to be passive in public life. Women must stand side by side with the men in public life in order to channel their energy into concrete action, in my view, in support of public education, women's rights, social justice, the fight against corruption, and so on. The situation in the MENA region has gone through a fundamental shift. The Arab Spring, or as some people call it, the Arab Awakening, did not only lead to the fall of dictators, but people's creativity and their ability to take initiatives became obvious. For a very long time, the citizens were not allowed to meet freely, to express themselves freely, and so on. But since 2011, the situation is really very different. We who are living in the area and the MENA region, we feel and see the energy which was accumulated during many years or decades now results in a number of initiatives and proposals taken by civil society and not least by the youth. People are searching for new identity, an identity which has a voice that should be listened to by the decision makers. People are beginning to develop a self-confidence, and they are asking questions, putting forward proposals, and taking initiatives which they previously only could dream of. Men, women, and youth are engaged in political discussions. This is also a new thing, in my view. Before, the political sphere was really a men's sphere. Women are not taking part in the political discussions to a much higher degree than was the case before. Unfortunately, women politicians in this region do not yet enjoy the same privileges and same logistic support as their male colleagues. But generally, therefore, the women will need more support to be integrated in public life, as well as into the economy, and to enter into the business community. In the Middle East, North Africa region, today, 27% of the women are into the labor force, while 76% of the men. So it is 3 times more men than women who are working. Greater female participation in the economy will bring more women into leadership positions, in the societies. Women's participation in politics will also lead to an increased focus on women's issues. I consider that women's political participation and then participation in the economy are mutually beneficial. One effect of the uprisings in the MENA region was that many believed that women were given a voice and the confidence to succeed in business. People increasingly began to shop online. Women saw that through social media, they literally had a voice and their opinion was taken into consideration. It's quite possible that women in the future who will use social media to build companies and online businesses, etc., will become economically quite strong and thereby have a real influence on the society and the decision making. The role of women in media, social media, is changing worldwide, not only here. And since they have so many activities online, blogs, communities, e-businesses, for example, they can also easily attain education and via the net. Some of the most prestigious universities, like Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, they have now online free courses where you can be available to anybody. That means that women in, for example, the Middle East and North Africa, who did not have the opportunity before to have an international education, can have the material, the study material, and the courses free of charge, and whenever she chooses. Women can today have an online business going on while having small children, without having to choose between the traditional way of life and the business. New possibilities are out there with the help of the social media. Finally, I want to say that the last year or two have started a process which is irreversible. Arab women have already taken the first steps towards full participation in public life. No laws can prevent the women from their getting out their energy and their passion for change. But until they themselves, and not least the men, fully realize how much they can contribute to the welfare of their societies, there is much work ahead. I myself, I am convinced really that the women's contribution to public life in the Middle East and North Africa will be something which will be taken for granted within a not too distant future. Thank you very much.